Good day. This is a presentation on HCI done by Brendon Hubbard of Lucas Gray in September 2025. HCI has delivered a 13% return per annum over the past 20 years, which is better than the JSE All-Share Index. And remember, this performance that you're seeing here also excludes the dividend over the period. The best way to value HCI is by sum of the parts, and the valuation is made up of two components. So firstly, you've got the listed investments at the top. You can see these are all listed companies, so pulling up the valuations is very easy. Below that, you've got the unlisted companies where we've established values. You can see, for example, Impact Oil and Gas. I'll show you later, but we've used the most recent transaction that happened in Impact Oil and Gas, which valued the business at just over 14 billion rand, and then you net the debt off, and you end up with a discount to the current NAV of just under 60%. So, I mean, we think we've been very conservative in our valuations. But it's important to point out that you do have complex financials with limited disclosures in some cases. And I mean, the most difficult things to get to the bottom of obviously the property and the debt. This graph here gives you a relative performance of HCI and its major holdings. The white line you can see there is HCI, and over the 3-year period you can see it's down roughly 34%. The standout performer is obviously Southern Sun, up significantly over the period, followed by the blue line there is Frontier Transport. And then the two underperformers, unfortunately, at the bottom would be Sun and eMedia, which have significantly dragged down HCI. Southern Sun has been benefiting from very strong international tourism into Southern Africa. That's particularly with their large Cape-based hotels. They've also got lots of leverage. So a 1% increase in occupancy adds roughly about 70 million rand to their bottom line. And an additional 100 rand per night room rate would add about 300 million rand in revenue to the group. So they've also been doing a big share buyback, which has been very beneficial. They've significantly lowered the debt, and this has been the standout performer in the HCI portfolio. Sun, on the other hand, has been a big problem. So you've got online gaming that has reached significant levels now in South Africa, but obviously they've been slow and have had technical issues in trying to access that market. More positively, recently you've seen the Sun app now reach 180,000 users, so they are getting into this market. It is a big market. There is strategic concerns by shareholders over the build out of hotels, and for example the acquisition of 13% of City Lodge holdings. There's also concerns around the big capex development that they want to do down in the Somerset West and build a big new casino. That could be in the order of maybe as much as 2 billion rand. They have got very high debt levels at the moment, which they have been bringing down, but they remain at elevated levels. But importantly, Sun has got some levers to pull, and we think with a more refined strategy from the board, they could unlock significant value in the company. So the map on the bottom left shows where the Sun casinos are based. The graph on the top right-hand side shows you in blue, shows you the slow decline of the land-based casinos, particularly after the COVID period, but then the explosive growth you can see coming through on the online gaming. Now, to fight back against that, Sun have launched this loyalty card, which obviously tries to integrate the hotels and their, for example, Emerald Resort as part of their marketing strategy. But the key emphasis for the board going forward should really be around the debt and building out this online gaming strategy for them to succeed. HCI is the controlling shareholder of Africa Energy, which is listed in Canada. They own these two large gas deposits that sit offshore Mossel Bay. It's more than 1 billion barrels of oil equivalent. It's in quite deep water depths. You'll see in a moment. I'll show you what it looks like. So basically, Africa Energy owns 75% of the deposit. Aerostar owns 25%, and then HCI owns just under 50% of Africa Energy. So there's enough gas here to generate approximately 2,300 megawatts of electricity. And I'll run through the capex numbers with you in a moment. And if we're assuming 6 hours of production per day, and we're looking at a R2 per kilowatt number at 2,300 megawatts, that gets you about 10 billion rands of the revenue. But keep in mind that R2 number is very conservative. I mean, if you look at the flex megawatt rate at peak, it's as much as 7 rand. Right, so the existing infrastructure, I mean, if you look at that picture on the right-hand side, there you've got Moss Gas, you've got the pipeline that then runs out to the FA platform and to the existing wells. You've then got about 120 kilometers of new pipeline that needs to be laid, and you can see that's at deeper depths. That's not really an issue now with new technology. The existing pipeline that runs from the FA platform into Mossel Bay is an 18-inch. It can carry just under 120 million gigajoules of power or gas a year. So Total Energies, when they were running with this project and they found these deposits, was in negotiations with Petra SA and Eskom to supply this gas at a floor of $6 and a cap at $9. That's based on where the oil price was. Capex at the time was estimated at about $2.5 billion to put all this in place and get the gas to shore. Negotiations broke down over the balance sheets of Petra SA and Eskom. You know, Total were going to go and obviously borrow a lot of that money. The banks wanted guarantees. Petra SA and Eskom weren't in a position to provide it with their balance sheet, and neither were the South African Treasury able to provide those guarantees. So, I mean, if you look at those numbers, if you take that $6 number and you look at the capacity of the existing pipeline, that would give you revenues of about $720 odd million per annum, going up to nearly $1 billion per annum. Okay, so there's several things that Africa Energy can do with this gas. They could potentially supply it to Petra SA and get Moss Gas up and going again. One of the other options is obviously to sell it into captive power plants. There really is a power plant that's running on diesel at the moment at Mossel Bay. So these are very much back of the matchbox calculations to try and establish if these projects are viable and what type of, potentially what type of profitability and revenues they could generate. So, I mean, if we have a look, your estimated offshore field capex is about $2.5 billion. So it's roughly about 44 billion rand. Your onshore gas turbines would be in the order of about 39 billion rand. So, I mean, in total, 84 billion, of which that can be quite heavily geared. So your equity check would be roughly, on my maths, about 12.6 billion rand. And then you would need about 7.1 billion rands worth of revenue to service the debt component. And, working on a 2 rand a kilowatt hour, which is a very low price, as I say, relative to where Megaflex peak is, that would generate about 10 billion rand. So I mean, the project works on the back of a matchbox calculation. To give you an idea, Medupi cost about 49 million rand per megawatt, but that excludes obviously the cost of the fuel. Where if you look at this project, 36.5 million rand per megawatt, that includes the gas. So obviously significantly cheaper. And if we look at it, Eskom currently burns between 10 and 25 billion rands worth of diesel per annum. Most of that is done during your peaks when that price is very, very high. And so this gas would go a long way to helping Eskom and to bring that down and to providing them with additional power. Importantly also, when we look at these calculations, is that there's significant value in the condensate, which is the byproduct, and it's quite difficult to value, but it could be as much as 10 to 15% of the value of the gas sales. So, I mean, there's a map of what it looks like. The other option is obviously to put a new, bigger pipe into the 200 kilometers into Mossel Bay, rather than using the smaller 210 million scuffs a day pipeline that already is there. And then the other option is to run a pipe into Port Elizabeth, and there's peaking stations there, and obviously there's industrial users. So there are potential users for this gas, but it's about obviously getting your offtakes from these corporates and getting the bank funding to do this project. So as I said, one of the options is obviously to sell it to Petra SA and for them to restart the Mossel Bay refinery. You've also got an existing peaking plant that's burning diesel at the moment. This project at $6 a gigajoule is very viable for PetroSA for them to produce diesel. You could also deliver gas, as I showed you on the previous map, into Port Elizabeth and into new users in Mossel Bay. So if you're just selling gas, you're generating somewhere over $700 million per annum. And that's against a capex cost of about $2.5 billion. So again, this project is certainly very viable. But the key is to get these offtakes and to mitigate the risks, particularly with PetroSA. So one of the options, for example, is you could install, and this is what other people are looking to do around South Africa and smaller gas deposits, is install these 18-ton a day LNG plants. They cost about $4 million to build. You buy them from Argentina. And then you can supply LNG to the likes of bakeries and small diesel users, and it's LNG is significantly cheaper than diesel. So I mean, you can see on these numbers that I've done here, it's about 110 rand a gigajoule for LNG versus about 580 gigajoules if you're burning diesel. You could also potentially get LNG. You can move LNG longer distances, so you can get it, for example, into the Cape Town market. Question is, can you ship it into smaller vessels into Hot Bay, Gordons Bay, Simonstown, and be able to get it into the Cape market? They're currently using, for example, paraffin and bakeries. That would be a big benefit to convert to LNG. As I said to you previously, there is significant value in the condensate, which is very difficult to put a number to. But these strategies which I've shown, these three strategies, all require foreign technical and capital partners. HCI won't do this alone, but importantly, these projects are viable. The biggest asset within HCI's unlisted investments is Impact Oil and Gas. And within Impact Oil and Gas, they own this Venus oil field, which was found by Total a couple of years ago off Namibia. This is a world-class light oil discovery. The plan is to have an FPSO of 160,000 barrels over it. We're expecting FID, which is final investment decision, to come now in Q1 2026, and for the first oil to be pumped in 2029. That FPSO will be built in Singapore and then sailed out to Namibia and connected up to the wells. One of the issues with these fields is they're very gaseous. So normally you'd have an FPSO that ranges between 200 to 250,000 barrels a day, but because of the gaseous nature, they've had to pull that back. These wells are generating about 200 million gigajoules of gas per annum. Now, to contextualize that, the existing Romco pipeline coming into South Africa from Mozambique brings in about 173 million gigajoules. So this one well will generate more gas than the Romco pipeline. And part of the problem is that Total are trying to get this cost below $20 a barrel, which is their global strategy. So HCI owns 4.845% of Impact Oil and Gas. Importantly, they have a free carry on the capex, so that number, that 4.8%, was a lot higher. They halved their position, and Total will then carry the capex and the risks attached to it. They will have to repay the capex, but they'll repay it out of existing cash flow. So HCI doesn't have to put up any capex up front or put the balance sheet of HCI at risk. So if we assume a number of $67 a barrel at the moment, the three Namibian taxes would take off about $23 a barrel, leaving about $24 a barrel's profit. So on 160,000 barrels, 340 days, at that percentage, 4.845%, that is roughly about a 1.1 billion rand per annum after tax profit that would flow to HCI when this project is up and running after 2029. These cash flows are not reflected in the share price at all, and are quite significant going forward. We value that HCI's 51.4% holding an impact at 7.36 billion rand, and that has been based on the acquisition of those shares that was done a few months back at $805 million. So one of the issues causing this delay, as I've indicated, is the gas, but it's also a very big opportunity. So like I said to you, each FPSO will generate roughly 200 picojoules, which is million gigajoules of natural gas per annum. If we take the US price at $3 a gigajoule, that would generate a roughly $600 million. That selling it at that price would help reduce the cost per barrel of oil by $10. At the moment, the plan is to inject that gas back into the ground. And one of the reasons for that is that the Venus field is about 300 kilometers from shore. So what you need is the guys who are closer to shore to start building the pipeline, and then you can link into it to get the gas to shore. So if you look at South Africa's total liquid energy consumption, and that would come from LPG, paraffin, heavy fuel oil, Eskom burning diesel by the shipload. You've got about 800 picojoules of liquid fuel is consumed in South Africa every year. So ideally, that's the size of the kind of the pipeline that needs to be built from Elizabeth's Bay. You can see there through to Kroonstad. Kroonstad, there's an existing pipe that you can pick up that would get you into Sasolburg and into the existing network. Looking forward, looking at the planning, we likely will see about 5 of these FPSOs off Namibia, coming from the likes of Galp and others. But this is it's a big project, $4 billion pipeline, and you would need to deliver into Gauteng. Certainly for Sasol to be viable, you would need to get it into Gauteng at about 100 rand a gigajoule. So, and the big project. This is what South Africa needs. Ultimately, to be very profitable, but it's the capex up front. This won't be borne by HCI. They're obviously a very, very small component of it. This will have to be driven by the other big oil companies and by the big consumers of gas in South Africa. Also sitting in unlisted investments is this Lakakonda. They own 90% of it. It owns a large wine farm in the Polar area, 70 hectares. They've also very recently, in the last few months, opened a big new retail development, which is that picture on the top right there, with Food Lovers Market, Builders Express, Cycle Lab. This is a big new development. And then they also own in this business a wine bottling business. Also sitting in the unlisted investments is their property assets, valued at about 3.1 billion rand. There's kind of early talk of these assets are now will be put up for sale and disposed of. Hopefully they'll use that money to do share buybacks. We'll talk about that at the moment. But I mean, you can see some of these assets that are quite big assets, and we think that they'll be sold very easily. Also sitting in the unlisted is a coal business. It's quite unsexy. People don't like these things anymore. But it's been a very good cash generator to HCI. We put a very low value on it. We only valued it at 2.5 times EBITDA. It has a new 8-year supply contract to Eskom. In the listed side, there's eMedia. It's a small component of the business. Pays through a nice dividend through to HCI. Also in the listed side is Frontier Transport. Fair size business, moves 46 million people a year. It's got a large fleet. They're busy putting in electric buses at the moment. And importantly, it also pays through a very strong dividend through to HCI every year. In early July, HCI announced a share buyback with Union Satawu. They basically are paying them 144 million rand to acquire 1.1 million shares at 131 rand a share. They also are going to be swapping 3 property assets that you can see there for 550 million rand for just under 4.2 million shares, also at 131 rand a share. This is obviously highly accretive to shareholders. Going forward, HCI have indicated they're looking to sell the balance of the property portfolio, and surprisingly, they're holding in Southern Sun potentially to a foreign buyer, which will allow them to obviously continue to do significant share buybacks. And this will have a big impact if they can mop up the overhang in the shares. The investment case of HCI really rests around the large discount to NAV, but also the optionality that these assets bring. So, for example, on Sulphur Sun, if we see a return back to its previous PE trading range, that could unlock significant upside. There's also no value attached to the Venus Namibia deposit, which is the impact oil and gas, which could come through with significant cash flows. And number 3, is really around the Mossel Bay gas deposit. There's very limited value attached to that currently, and those numbers could be quite large going forward, as I've shown. Number 4 is you've got the Wild Coast oil and gas, which they believe is very prospective opportunity. It could be as lucrative as Namibia. They have done some seismics, which do look quite exciting. And number 5 is, finally is a possible sale of the Southern Sun Hotel Group, which they've now chatted about, and also the disposal of the property portfolio, and a possible unbundling of the group, which has also been mooted. But the investor relations does need to be improved, which could unlock significant value. So the question is, what is HCI worth? And I'll leave that for you to decide. But I mean, if you look down that list of holdings, and certainly listed companies, if they do sell Southern Sun, for example, that would be a materially higher price than it is at the moment. Certainly, there could be a decent fix in Soko Sun, and you could see that price recover significantly higher. And then, I mean, if you look down, for example, Africa Energy, you've got tiny little value there that could be significantly unlocked. And then looking down into the big one is obviously the Impact Oil and Gas. You would start to see that value come through in terms of its underlying cash flows, as opposed to an NAV number now. And then with the sale of the properties in that, you'd see that debt number being wound down quite significantly, and that could unlock significantly higher value than this estimated NAV that we've got at the moment at 288, which is with the share price trading at under 120 odd rand, gives you close to a 60% discount to NAV. So, I mean, there's quite a bit of work to be done here by management. There are some levers that they can pull, but there is an exciting outlook going forward. So this is the Future Titans Fund and the performance since we launched it. HCI has a 3% weighting in the fund, and it's certainly something that we're looking to possibly increase. And finally, the disclaimer. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that gives you some more insight into what's going on and some of the unlisted assets and the potential it brings. Thank you.